My name is Couch Coop and we're looking at FA-18 Interceptor, which came out in 1988, and I was fortunate enough to be able to play this on an Amiga 500. I'm going to use this video to talk about my deep-rooted love for simulator arcade flight-based shooters, and looking at these vector models I can remember clearly using the keyboard to turn the engine on, looking at the different angles out of the cockpit. This was brain blasting stuff. Elite was bouncing around with its wire style models, but this was fully fleshed out and it played so well. There's a section in the game where you fly underneath a bridge. I think it's supposed to be San Fran. Of all of the flight games that exist in my memory, this one is the earliest experience. And of all of the games that are available on that Amiga, this was my go-to one until I had it all worked out. Being able to see the horizon and having those hands-on controls, it was a first for me. The model of plane, the FA-18, also becomes relevant later in the video, and I'm not some flight sim fanatic with the sticks and into all of the newer high-end flight simulation games, or even back then in the late 90s or early 2000s. I was very much wanting that arcade experience, but really this was the first place where I stumbled across the genre full stop. A lot of you might be thinking, why am I going in so deep with this? This started as an Ace Combat 7 PlayStation 5 review, and as with all things video games based, it's got this big iceberg underneath it that I want to show you guys because I've had such ancient relic-like experiences with the genre. Keeping on that technical side, as opposed to the arcade shooting, there was a Harrier Jump Jet game available also on the Amiga. The game's music had no right slapping that hard.
Hitting it.
I also had a massive boomer emulation moment and sat and thought to myself, I really want to play UN Squadron, and there it was, just streamable through a web page. Didn't have to download anything. I was completely gobsmacked. This is only the real sort of side-scrolling example I will use in this video, and if you notice, I'm also getting the pad inputs coming up. Didn't work out how to turn that off, but again, music on these menus completely bangs as well. So this is my first experience with anime-style characters in a video game. So way before Final Fantasy, all of that classic art that we remember from the 90s, this is where I first saw it. I first saw it in a copy of CMVG, and it was pictures of the characters that you could choose from and the shop and all of these options. I know R-Type was around, but it did feel like a very, very surface level RPG shooter, and I think this may have been the first step in that direction. And I think that's what the Ace Combat series tried to grasp as well, a sort of character-based arcade flight simulation game where you're invested in your wing buddies and you have people on the ground that you're communicating with on the radio. Also had a stealth bomber boss scene, and that music, that takes me back also. So Terminator 2 came out and I clapped eyes on the greatest bit of machinery I'd ever seen at that age. This thing was unbelievable. Featuring horizontal and vertical tilt, this thing just took up so much room in the arcade. It was massive and loud and expensive. I just looked at the screen, you know, the demo running, and just dreamed about what it would be like to play this thing. This is Afterburner 1, by the way. It was sequeled and it was put on to consoles. We'll come to that in a second. This is some 60 frames per second footage. I'm not too sure what those cabinets refreshed at, but it still looks pretty incredible this long afterwards. I remember Space Harrier being out and having a similar buzz, and we still have some seeds of this gameplay in Ace Combat 7, which I'll show you at the end of the video. Could also be one of my earliest memories of a bad port. This is what we got on the Sega Master System. But back then, I think my 11-year-old eyes didn't care. I could play Afterburner in my front room, even though it did sound and look absolutely horrendous. Talking of horrendous, it was remade in 2006. They kept going with this series, there's quite a lot of them. This is epilepsy-inducing footage, right? Just briefly want to apologise to anyone with epilepsy or suffers from that condition. I wanted to say, before we went on, thank you to the gaming gods, that I don't have to talk about what we're looking at here, and we get to look at some amazing gaming heritage and an absolutely awesome modern arcade flight simulation game. I really enjoyed doing these style of videos. Couch co-op's fun and split screens awesome, but I also have a deep passion for gaming heritage and these style of videos. So drop me a like, drop me a sub, and think yourself lucky you don't have to look at the absolute mind-numbing shite that's going past on screen now. So we're going right up to 1997 now with Ace Combat 2, commonly regarded as one of the strongest sequels in the whole franchise. My memory serves me correctly, this was on both the PlayStation 1 and the PlayStation 2, and this sort of knocked everyone back a bit. It was the first in the series, obviously because it's only the second one, but people realised that this was a very strong Japanese title and it wasn't going anywhere anytime soon, and it also was using a lot of that PlayStation 2's power properly. Ace Combat 3 Electrosphere was released in Japan in 1999, got it over in Americas and Europe in the year 2000. This intro could be my favourite of the entire franchise. The years 2000 and 2005, that stretch was a crazy time in video game history for me. I think, and on calendar as well. We saw some early Metal Gear games make it onto that PlayStation 2, and I was heavily into this.
Ada, do you request control instructions?
But in the last half year, the situation on Mars has changed drastically. Now, Balram's war potential is very strong.
You know, Armored Core 6 is going to keep me indoors for 6 months. I cannot wait to get my hands on that game. I can only apologise for not getting it on the channel sooner. I think I might have played really close to the wind with those chords and copyright, but I wanted to briefly talk about Microsoft's newest flight simulator game. It came over onto Game Pass. I would never have forked out the money for it, but I had a PC that could run it just, and I was totally amazed at that photorealism over the cities and getting to see the interiors of all of these commercial aircrafts. There's no actual dogfights in the game, but it's still a hell of a thing to look at. And the Maverick DLC was free. You can come straight out of the cinema and do the mission that he did. I feel it's getting closer, Coop, closer to the Ace Combat 7 review on the PlayStation 5. Yes, we do have our own Maverick DLC paid. Unfortunately, didn't look at it, but it's still fun to know that Ace Combat put its foot in the old Maverick door.
H2, begin takeoff sequence. You're cleared for launch.
We're here, we're finally here. Foreshadowed it in the last clip. What are we looking at? Give me some specs, please. 60 frames per second. 1080p, ouch, that last one hurts a bit. Could have been 4K, it's 2019 this game came out. No patch, no SSD, but this game was a looker on its launch and it's still stunning now. Against what we've been looking at previously, I know they're obviously older games, but it still pops brilliantly against quite new, modern, have played that flight simulator recently games that are out there. The almighty Skill Up, peace be upon him, got this game early and said very good things about it. I think he sort of pushed it to the masses with his larger channel back then. I did have my eyes on this in the pipeline for a while. Screenshots, I was kind of expecting it. I think it took a lot of the bigger name reviewers a little bit by surprise at how much depth it offered for a flight-based arcade shooter. What pulls me to it over flight simulation games or even the Microsoft game is, yeah, what we're seeing now. Crazy, outlandish craft flying around in a sort of semi-future, dealing with like kidnapped presidents, got Metal Gear. Almost Kojima level of radio comedy. But you just don't know what you're going to come up against. It's not going to obey loads of sober realism. The brief is pretty broad, so it's very cool, A, to fly real-life planes against like future drones and hearing everyone shouting on the radio, the music fires up. It does get you in the feels loads, this game.
They got mates too. He's down.
It wants to yank away from its tight arcade shooter leash, and it will give you loads of depth on missions, and you'll even have a lot of craft differential, which we'll talk about in a second. But not only air to air, you're taking out ground units. There's a detailed mission briefing, and you can have a tactic. The game loves you to go fast and hard with the times and score. There's a lot of online leaderboard contesting, and this has also got a full-blown multiplayer mode, which like, no way am I ever going anywhere near.
Push the plan forward too fast. This is too far from Allied territory. Trigger, there's one more to go.
My point being, it's well within your interest to do that mission at high speed and with great efficiency, swinging tightly round corners, lining up targets immediately and just getting that high score and the nice low time. One of the things that will get to you is the noise of the whole damn thing, and all of the reviewers spoke about the missile warning announcement. It becomes sort of water off a duck's back for me after a while. You sort of get used to the idea and looking and using that map to just snake around and slowly get rid of the missile without getting in a massive panic. It's also got something else which I would never have expected in a game of this type. It's normally something you would see in a car racing game, but it's got a replay of all of the missions. It's such an incentive to do them. It's got 2 speeds. You can adjust the angle, think a little bit like Elite Dangerous with the outsides. It can create some absolutely breathtaking scenes, and of course the soundtrack can be slapped on and off. There's too much fun. As you well know, I get sucked in with this stuff anyway. This is just huge for me. Such a gift. Those 60 frames per second really come in handy with this section of the game, and as with car games, there's a big incentive to get new planes, look at them in action, see all the missile undercarriage, and unlike car games, these things have got guns, machine guns at the front, multiple air-to-air missile racks, air-to-ground. They're just the peak of engineering for mankind.
Mihai's looking worse. Thank God he has his granddaughters here to help him out.
Let's talk about 7's story, because it is surprisingly dramatic considering the landscape of which it takes place. And there's a hell of a twist after mission 4, which is so worth looking out for, because all of the dialogue and dynamic changes with the team. So that's something that I was pleasantly surprised with. We do get some pretty cool cutscenes. They're quite high-end, quite high quality. I like that. And right back to the UN Squadron thing, we've got some faces, we've got some names to associate with this air combat.
Wonder what he did to get sent here.
Let's talk briefly about that Zone of the Ender combat. With having your missiles locked onto things, you can basically cycle through targets. It's nice and simple, with a healthy nod to its arcade heritage. It's just a quick change on a button for different missile types. That machine gun's a little bit tricky at times, but dogfighting is very cool, and using those multiple views is awesome. That brings me over to the completely amazing, completely free PlayStation 1 VR mode, which isn't compatible with the 2, unfortunately. Mission 5, i.e. 444, is one of the tougher difficulty spikes in the game, and I want feedback from anyone who went through the needle with that one. I really struggled with it. I ran out of flares. Everything just would always go wrong because I'm looking for tiny little green marks inside a massive white cloud. On a TV that should be running this at 4K, that's my excuse.
Silence. Deserters will be punished. Shut up. Shut up.
Included on that PlayStation Plus up until the 20th of February, I think that's what it says, Standard Edition. That's a very good opportunity to look at one of the more modern arcade shooter flight simulator games. I'm pretty sure this sold quite well in the West, and we should have had some rumours by now for a lovely exclusive PlayStation 5 Ace Combat 8. Can I get something in the comments about that, please? If you're a massive Ace Combat veteran, I do apologise for ham-fistedly going through the history of the title with myself and flight arcade shooters in general. And I very much look forward to seeing you down there.
In gun range.
Hey. What's going on?
Yeah, next door, playing Ace Combat 7. Stuck on level 5, apparently something about 444.
What happened?
Kept running out of flares.
What was his name?
Couch cute.
Watch my 9mm go bang. Why not a bang? Why not a bang?